Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Thanks everyone for joining us today. My name is Anna Rubin, and I'm pleased to welcome all of you on behalf of the OECD and its Local Development Forum. For those of you who don't know us, the Local Development Forum is the OECD's hub that brings together a community of thousands of local development professionals across 60 plus countries. And we like to say that we're a two-way street between the OECD and local communities, helping to disseminate the OECD's work more broadly beyond capitals, as well as bringing local voices and experiences to OECD debates and discussions. And for today's discussion, I'm really pleased to be joined today by Liz Joldeski, Executive Officer of Main Street Australia. This discussion follows a webinar that we did on the future of retail on Main Streets back in July, where we heard from experiences from the US, UK, Ireland, Canada, and the Netherlands. So it's great now to be in the Southern Hemisphere. And we'll add a link to this earlier webinar in the chat for those of you who are interested. Today's webinar is really designed to be an informal discussion, the type of conversation you may actually have on a main street over a coffee or at a restaurant. And so for Liz and those of you in Australia, perhaps you're having this conversation over a cocktail, but for those of us in Europe, it's more likely over a coffee. So whatever your beverage of choice, I encourage you to put your questions and comments in the chat, and we'll try and bring them into this conversation over the next 30 minutes that we have together. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. So Liz, thanks for joining us today. Let's start with an easy question. For our international audience, perhaps you can tell us a little bit about Victoria's Main and Australia's Main Streets, as well as your organization's role in supporting them.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Anna, and good evening to everyone from Melbourne, Australia. My drink of choice is H2O. Unfortunately, I didn't get the memo, but next time I will be bringing a cocktail with me to these sessions. Before I commence, I'd just like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which I'm joining you from. I'm coming to you from Naarm, which is otherwise known as Melbourne, and I'd like to pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. And also for those of you who don't know who Main Street Australia is, I might just tell you a little bit about us. We're a peak body in Australia who looks after the traditional main streets, high streets and town centres around Australia. So we're a not-for-profit, and we strive to make sure that main streets function as a major economic and community focus. And we do that by a number of ways. So we basically work with local councils, local governments. We also work with business associations, local communities and other economic development professionals around Australia to help them with their education, with their networking, and also to advocate on their behalf so that we can ensure the ongoing revitalisation and success of our main streets. So that's who we are as an organisation. Our main street, so in Victoria, Melbourne. So Victoria, for those of you who don't know, it's on the south eastern part of Australia, so the bottom of Australia, just above the beautiful island of Tasmania. We've got a population here of around 6 million, and we've actually got around 698 main streets around the state. So we've recently done some research, and we've got quite a lot of main streets. Many of them are based in small towns, regional towns, so they are quite small, but a lot of them, we estimate around 150 to 200 would be your large shopping strip with a very diverse mix of commercial, retail and other type of services and businesses. We also estimate that around 90% of Victoria's population actually lives within 10 kilometres of a main street. So this makes these centres and these strips very accessible and makes them really easy locations for retail, commercial, community and other business activities. The other thing that we'd like to just note and comment on is just how vital and how important these main streets are, not just from an economic development perspective, but from a social and community development perspective. So in Victoria, main streets employ around 390,000 people. So this is actually around 11.7% of our state's jobs and our employment. So it's very significant. And they also generate over $50 billion in economic value, which equates to around 12% of our gross state product. And the other thing is that they also provide employment opportunities very often to small mum and dad, family business people, and also people who come from diverse and often very marginalized communities. So culturally and linguistically diverse communities make up a significant portion of the business owners on our main streets. And you'd probably also know that Australia and Victoria is a very multicultural nation, and Victoria is also home to one of the most culturally diverse societies around the world. And we have nearly 29% of our population is actually born overseas. And a lot of them came to this country hoping to make a better life for themselves, my parents included. They came from the former Yugoslavia in the late 60s and ran a whole lot of small businesses on main streets for quite a few years. So that's who we are as a state, and in terms of our main streets. The only other comment I wanted to make in relation to that question was Melbourne is also really well known for its iconic tram network. So we've got a tram network that provides direct accessibility to our main streets. So the system is said to be one of the largest operational urban tram networks in the world. We've got something like 493 trams, 24 routes, and yeah, they're a major form of public transport in the city. And as I said, they provide a vital connectivity and access to our main streets. So I feel like I've thrown a lot of stats and data at you. But yeah, I'm not sure if there's any comment or any questions on that, but it might be useful for some of the people around the tiles who might have similar sized, populations or economies to Victoria, maybe to make some observations as well.
Great. Thanks, Liz. So yeah, feel free to kind of put your comments and reactions in the chat. And I think, the stats are always really powerful. When you hear it's 1 in 10 jobs, 12% of state GDP, you really get a sense of the economic importance. But I think also when you talk to people who are involved in main streets, you really get a sense of the social importance and also these personal connections that a lot of people have. You talked about your parents. My grandparents also ran a small grocery store on a main street. So these are really things that we care about, both from an economic perspective and from a personal and social perspective. So I wanted to talk a little bit about kind of looking back at the past couple of years, and Melbourne had one of the longest COVID-19 lockdowns in the world. And so I'm curious kind of what impact this had on your main streets and also what you learned from this experience in terms of policy responses and what you think can be taken forward kind of beyond the intense COVID period. I know COVID's not over, but hopefully we're beyond the worst of it.
Hopefully that is the case. Absolutely, yeah. We it's not a tag that we like to be known for, but yeah, we did endure I think one of, if not the longest lockdowns. It was 263 harsh and brutal days of lockdown in Melbourne. So yeah, we've all been through, I guess, the wars, with COVID-19 and what we've experienced over the last couple of years, but we had a particularly tough time here in Melbourne. So huge sacrifices were made, and it had really devastating and long-lasting impacts on our people, on our businesses, and it affected every layer of our communities. The mental health of individuals and mental health rates, across the community really went through the roof. A lot of businesses did actually close down during after the peak of the lockdowns in 2020. And vacancy rates on our main streets have actually risen since the onset of COVID-19 to reach around 20% across some of our main streets, which is really, really high. When you look at before COVID-19, they would have been on average around 5 to 6%. So huge impacts on the financial viability of businesses. over the period of lockdown in 2020 and 21, and a lot of businesses and some main streets have been unable to recover. And then on top of all of this, as I'm sure we're all experiencing around the world, we emerged out of lockdown, and whilst we tried to get back to normal, this year we've been faced with so many other challenges on top of that. So the biggest challenges being faced here in Victoria and Melbourne in relation to main streets, so the ongoing impact of not being able to find enough staff. Also, the pressure of the fact that the economy hasn't been able to rebound, and that there's all of these cost of living pressures, prices are going up, inflation's going up. So that's having huge effects on people and their spending as well. So when we look at some of the responses to the pandemic, obviously in Victoria, they were quite significant. The government had to jump in and had to, try and, support these businesses and our people to survive during the COVID-19 lockdowns. So I might just chat about some of the policy responses. So we've got a national government. So at the federal level, the Australian government implemented a policy which was called JobKeeper. So this was a program which provided direct payment to companies that employed people. And that was absolutely crucial. It was absolutely vital to ensure that those businesses that were locked down could continue to pay their staff, even though they had reduced hours or if they weren't operating. Then at the state government level in Victoria, there was millions of dollars that was put into business support programs. So some of the types of initiatives that I'd like to share with the audience today, I mentioned mental health. So there was a big focus on mental health programs and crisis support for small business owners. So this is something that I've never seen before in my 20+ years in economic development, but it was necessary. It was so necessary. So partnering with mental health experts and not-for-profits in this state, we've got some amazing not-for-profits in the mental health space. We had telephone helplines, wellbeing coaching, financial counselling sessions, just trying to help these businesses to survive through that stressful period. There was also a very specific focus in Victoria on hospitality businesses. So obviously, through the lockdowns, a lot of them couldn't trade. So there was additional support that was provided to hospitality businesses. One of the biggest successes, and I'd be interested to get responses from around the tiles, and this was when we'd emerge out of one lockdown. So we had 6 lockdowns overall. We'd emerge out of one, and the government was trying to get people back out and to, eat and dine outside of their houses. So we had an outdoor eating and entertainment package that was provided, something like 44 million in grants for outdoor dining, i.e. otherwise known as parklets. So this was a huge success, and I think that's going to be a lasting legacy. Outdoor dining has exploded in Melbourne and across Victoria and all around Australia. And I'm sure this is nothing new to Parisians and many others in Europe. But that's something very, very new to us. There was also grants that were provided to landlords, so property owners of these commercial premises. Up to 3,000 Australian dollars was given to these commercial landlords who otherwise might not have been able to reduce the commercial rent for their tenants. So that was all about trying to provide some relief to the traders, but supporting the landlords to try and get them to actually reduce rents. So lots of different initiatives there. If I could just mention one more, another focus that was quite novel and one that we've applauded and we'd like to see more focus on in the future. For the first time in Victoria, the government provided support to the business associations, so the business chambers and the trader groups that are actually involved in the coordination and management of our main streets. These were actually recognised as being vital conduits to being able to assist and reach traders and small businesses on main streets. So there were grants that were given to non-profit business associations to do one of a few different initiatives. One was to focus on the marketing of the main street, how to create and implement campaigns, or have upgrades to their websites, or maybe introduce some trader directories and some buy local campaigns. The funding was also used for capacity building, so to build the skills of these businesses, to focus on improving their digital skills and having an online presence. And the third area was to actually focus on placemaking activities. So this was, looking at creative installations and having events and just trying to draw people back onto main streets. So quite a lot and quite a lot of diversity of the programs, and at all levels of government, there was quite a lot of support. I guess what we're saying at Main Street Australia is that we need more. Like, lockdown obviously finished a year ago. And as you said, Anna, we're still feeling the effects of COVID. Like, we're talking about another wave here as well, just, with summer coming up in Australia. So it hasn't finished. And there are other challenges that are being faced by these main streets. So we need to see more of these types of programs that are focused on businesses on our main streets.
Great, thanks. I mean, there's so many different points that I could pick up on there, but we only have about 10 minutes left together. But
Okay.
I know it goes fast, huh?
It does, it sure does.
But I wanted to pick up on that last point about the kind of support for the business support organizations, because often when we talk about revitalizing main streets or town centers or high streets, depending on which national context, which vocab we want to use, we think in terms of kind of hard infrastructure. But I think you have this point that this kind of, I don't want to call it soft infrastructure because that kind of diminishes it, but this other type of infrastructure matters too. So maybe talk us a little bit more about that kind of soft infrastructure and those types of business support organizations and why those really matter when we're thinking about supporting our main streets.
Yeah, such a great question. And yeah, I guess everyone knows when we talk about, the hard infrastructure, that's required for our main streets or to develop and grow and to plan our cities, upgrades to roads, or looking at getting the right public transport, whether it's trams or trains, buses, also beautification and landscaping of main streets. These are all physical things that you can see that actually happen on the street level. But what we say at Main Street Australia is that that's very important. It's obviously vitally important to making a place safe, beautiful, accessible, and to attract people to go there in the first place. And I think governments of all persuasion do that hard infrastructure type of work really, really well. But the other side, beneath the surface, is what goes on behind the scenes. So it's that coordination of the management of these main streets so that we can market them more effectively, and so that we can coordinate events and activation more effectively. So that's what we refer to when we talk about the soft infrastructure. We feel like we still need more investment in hard infrastructure, but the soft infrastructure is just as, if not more important. So in Victoria, the model that we've got for the management and the coordination of our main streets it's akin to what is known around the world as business improvement districts. So in Victoria, we've got it's part of the Local Government Act. So local councils are able to raise rates, special levy, which they raise through all businesses on a main street. And then the collection, once that rate is collected, then it's returned to the business association, and then the business association is able to use that to do good and new things for the main street. So to look at all of those things that we've talked about: marketing, campaigns, placemaking and activation. So we've got around 68 of those special levy rate schemes in Victoria, but we feel like there could be, and there needs to be a lot more needs to be done to professionalize and to coordinate and better serve and better skill up these business associations so that they could do this job more effectively. When you look at what these main streets are competing with, they're competing with shopping centres, they're competing with digital online shopping, all of the other challenges of running a small business. They need all of the support that they can get. So we feel like there's a real gap in not just in Victoria, but I believe, and we believe worldwide, and an opportunity to further upskill and professionalise the management and the coordination of main streets. So that's something that we as a not-for-profit are really keen to promote and to continue to work on in conjunction with our governments and other stakeholders in Australia.
Great, thanks so much. And I want to pick up on a point you just raised there about kind of digitalization and kind of who these main streets are competing with. And we actually had a question in the chat come in from the UK about how main streets are evolving in Australia, and the participant kind of references the UK and the impact that online shopping has had there. And we also recently had a blog post from Main Street America who talked about online shopping, but also the kind of rise of, he called them clicks and bricks strategies, so kind of hybrid retail.
Yeah.
If you could talk a little bit about the kind of the impact of e-commerce on Australians' main streets, and do you see your main street retailers kind of using these hybrid strategies? What does the current context look like in that sense?
Yeah, look, it's exactly the same here. Absolutely. The hybrid strategies are absolutely, vital. We certainly encourage, all Main Street and businesses on main streets to not just focus on their bricks and mortar, but to focus, on their online presence and strategies. And that's probably another positive that came out of, if we can say that there were any positives that came out of COVID, was the fact that businesses actually, had time to really stop and to just have a look at their operations, at their products and services, at what they do, and to look at improving their business and working on it. So that's one of the benefits that came out of COVID here in the state, and taking that opportunity to look at improving their digital skills, their websites, and having a really a much more rigorous e-commerce strategy is definitely something that's taking off here. We're expecting and hoping that we'll get more small business government support to further support more digitalisation going forward. So yeah, absolutely, very important here for our businesses.
Great, thanks so much. And we actually just had an event at the OECD last week that was coordinated by our colleagues who work for our SME committee looking at kind of digitalization for SMEs with a focus on hybrid retail. So maybe one of my colleagues can put the link in the chat for those of you who are interested in that. I wanted to ask kind of one final kind of wrap up question. We have about 5 minutes left. From your perspective, we're the OECD, so we're always trying to kind of help international learning. What do you think other places should take away from the Australia experience, or what local innovations are you most excited about to say, hey, the world needs to know about this? big question, I know, but
that's a big question, Anna. No, I love it. It's such an important one. Well, I feel like because we have those scars, from lockdown, and because we really tried anything and everything, from a business support perspective, I think there were some real innovative approaches by all, governments, as I said, helping businesses and small business owners with their mental health and managing their stress, and has really assisted them, focusing on resilience. That's another area that's had a great lot of attention here in Australia. So there's a lot of focus on upskilling businesses, for business continuity, and just looking at future, disaster, preparedness. That's something like even recently, I think I was speaking with you before we got on live, that We've had some really extreme weather in Australia, particularly on the south eastern seaboard, and we've just recently come out of some floods. There've been quite a lot of towns and main streets that have been devastated with floods. So I was even talking to a couple of business associations that are, had to check in with their businesses to see, have they got insurance? What sort of insurance have they got? So these type of, this is going to become a feature going forward. So we're putting a lot of focus on resilience and helping businesses to have, those plans. I guess the other area was what I referred to before, the grants for business chambers and traders groups. I feel like there was some real innovation that occurred there from the state government, and there was some really positive impacts that came as a result of that program. New businesses were established, new jobs were created, so that I feel like that was quite innovative. And I just also I feel like they're probably the key areas for us here.
Great, thanks. And then I think the flip side of that question too is kind of, what are you looking to learn from international experiences, or where do you feel like other learnings from other countries can kind of inform the work in Australia?
Yeah, that's a really important question as well. And obviously it's fantastic that we're connecting with you, and we have so much to learn and so much more to do. And we are focusing on, the governance and the management of main streets. So that model, we know that bids are, they're quite prolific worldwide, that there's something like 2,500 bids. And I hope everyone knows what that acronym stands for, Business Improvement Districts. So we know that they're used quite frequently in the USA and in the UK and Canada and across parts of Europe as well. So there's some movement in Australia to look at introducing bids. New South Wales, the state above Victoria, is making some great progress there, which is fantastic. So we feel like we want to learn more around how prevalent are bids still internationally, and what benefits are coming from them, and I guess advice around getting them off the ground, getting the support and getting the leadership to actually implement and introduce bids comprehensively. That would be phenomenal support for us.
Great, thanks so much, Liz. I mean, we're already at 9:30. There's still so much more we could talk about, but I really want to thank
I know.
Maybe we'll do part 2 soon, but I really want to thank you for taking the time, your evening, our morning, to have this conversation with us. I hope everyone enjoyed it as much as I did. The recording of this webinar will be made available online shortly, and we'll also do a kind of written summary that we'll disseminate to everyone. And I also want to recall that this webinar is part of a new OECD project looking at the future of main streets and commercial corridors. So if you're interested in learning more, please don't hesitate to contact us. And hopefully through this project, we can help answer some of these questions, around bids, and also kind of help spread those promising Australian experiences across the OECD as well. And then the final thing I wanted to flag is that we will have our final Local Development Forum webinar of the year on December 13th, looking on human-centered design and local employment services. So a little bit of a different topic, but maybe there's a little bit of overlap, thinking about the people at the center of all of these questions. And you can find more information on that on our forum website. So thanks again for joining us, and I hope to see you virtually or in person at a future forum event again. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.